Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。Two high-profile US officials came accusing China of so-called overcapacity during their official visits here recently, has left people scratching their heads. Both Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Secretary of State Antony Blinken flew all the way to China to order Beijing to stop producing so many low-cost, high-quality goods, particularly electric vehicles and solar panels. But to anyone with a functioning brain, the overcapacity trope just doesn't make any sense, and most can see it for what it is: a desperate attempt from a falling power, trying one last time to hold on to the hegemony they've enjoyed since the end of World War II. Today we'll chat with special guest Warwick Powell from Queensland University of Technology. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Boreham in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. Decoupling, de-risking, overcapacity. These are just some of the terms Washington has employed recently in its desperate attempts to whip China into line. And it is not working. Both Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited China recently, bringing with them a term that had the world laughing: overcapacity. The claim: China is producing so many electric vehicles and solar panels, among other things, that the world just doesn't need. Translation: please stop producing so many high-quality, low-cost goods because we just cannot compete. And that truly is the crux of the matter. The US-led West has absolutely no chance of competing with Chinese industry, so Washington wants to stop the flow of Chinese goods at the source. Why they thought anyone would take them seriously is anyone's guess. Warwick Powell, adjunct professor at Queensland University of Technology and senior fellow at the Taihe Institute, recently penned a piece for Global Times titled "The Real Problem is Western Undercapacity, Not Chinese Overcapacity." He writes, US policymakers have let themselves and the world down. The US has undercapacity, excessive private debt, negligible savings, and an economy that spends more on the military than any other. The world benefits from Chinese capacity and its investment in manufacturing across the globe. The issue isn't Chinese overcapacity, it's the incumbent powers wanting to keep control of who can develop and when they can develop. Today, Warwick is on the show. Welcome to Reports on China.
Happy to be here, Andy.
Now, I feel like the recent visit to China by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, where we first heard this accusation of overcapacity against China, already put to bed any suggestion that what she was trying to tell the world had any basis in actual fact. So I was quite surprised that when Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited last week, he brought up that trope again. So I was wondering, why do you think they keep flogging that dead horse? And do you think anyone actually believes it, and particularly themselves?
Look, it's hard to know what they believe these days, Andy. I think a lot of this has got to do with domestic politics and the election in November this year. Most of American motor vehicle manufacturing takes place in Detroit, in the state of Michigan, and the electoral college votes from that state will be quite pivotal to the success or otherwise of the presidential candidate. So I think a lot of this is actually driven by domestic politicking. Of course, bashing China is a convenient device at the moment in American politics to deflect from the challenges that America faces at home and also internationally in other parts of the world.
So what do you think Washington's end goal is here then with this overcapacity claim?
I think you're probably giving Washington more credit than it's due, in the sense that I'm not sure it necessarily has a long-term end goal in mind, other than a deep down, almost emotional desire to recover what they feel has been lost. And I think what is being experienced at the moment is essentially a chronic case of displacement anxiety. The global economy and the structure of the global economy has basically been evolving over the last 30 to 40 years, whereby it is less and less resembling a system with one single unipolar pivot to one that has many poles and many significant economic actors, economies or civilizations who are doing their own thing.
You made an interesting point in your Global Times piece about how much of China's production output in motor vehicles is actually sold domestically right here in China, which seems to make that already laughable claim of overcapacity hurled around by Washington that little bit more hilarious, I guess. I mentioned on our last show the example of Xiaomi's first car, the SU7, which, as you'll know, sold out for the rest of this year in just 24 hours. And those are domestic sales. So can you tell us a bit about the number of cars China makes every year and how many of those are exports as compared to other manufacturers like Germany and Japan?
The fact of the matter is that the majority of Chinese output is for the domestic market. We've touched on the EV situation, but in motor vehicles generally, in 2023, China produced a little bit over 30 million cars and exported less than 5 million of them. So China exported about 16% of its motor vehicle manufactured outputs. Germany, on the other hand, produced a little over 4 million and exported 3 million, or 75%. And Japan produced about 7 million cars and exported 4.4 million of those, or 63%. And of course, nobody has actually ever complained about German and Japanese industrial overcapacity. So I think it's important just to put these issues into some context. The reality is that manufacturing capability, particularly in complex, high value added areas such as motor vehicles, isn't something that happens everywhere in the world, which means that a global division of labour does emerge, and of course it evolves as capabilities develop. China has, over the last 30 years, developed an industrial ecosystem that has progressively become more sophisticated and complex to a point where today it is a leader in the manufacture of electric vehicles, battery technologies, and those sorts of things. This isn't an overnight success story. This has been the accumulation of decades of capacity building in supply chains, in human resources, in systems management, logistics and coordination, to a point where China not only achieves economies of scale, but is able, as a result of that, to deliver increasingly low prices globally. And that's a great thing for people around the world who are wanting to participate in a low-carbon transition.
Yeah, interesting point. And another interesting point you made in your article was that we aren't witnessing overcapacity from Chinese production. Instead, it's a case of undercapacity in the West. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean there?
Yeah, look, if the complaint basically is that China is making more, the flip side, of course, is that the West is really saying that it doesn't make enough itself. And we see that, of course, in the EV space, where the American motor vehicle industry has been a laggard in this space and is many, many years behind the technology thresholds that the Chinese manufacturing sector has reached. And there might be some reasons that help us explain that too, such as the fact that the United States is the world's largest manufacturer and consumer of crude oil. It might go some way towards understanding why the internal combustion engine motor vehicle sector remains the dominant transportation motor vehicle sector in the United States. The hope, of course, I think from a policy point of view, is to forestall the ability of Chinese manufactured products coming into America, to give a window of opportunity and time for American incumbent firms to make as much as they can on the basis of existing technologies, number one, but also to play catch up so that they are not left behind as demand for electric vehicles continues to grow.
If I could give one piece of advice to Washington, it would be to get off your high horse, sit down at the table with everyone else and start working together like adults. What advice would you give?
My general sense is that Washington at the moment is struggling to own its own problems. The United States economy is experiencing all sorts of challenges, and the domestic social settlement has many imbalances where the promise of the American dream is, in many instances, a nightmare for people. We have over 60% of American households living from paycheck to paycheck. We have over 20% of American households reporting that they skip meals to be able to afford to pay the rent or mortgage repayments. The United States Department of Agriculture released a recent report that estimated that 12.8% of American households are currently in a state of food insecurity, or to put it another way, households don't have enough food to eat. These are significant social imbalances that are that reflect an economic structure and a long-run policy model that has seen Wall Street benefit at the expense of Main Street, leaving more and more people living on Struggle Street. And unfortunately, until America can own that problem or that bundle of problems, it's always going to be looking to point fingers at others. Now, in an interconnected world, pointing fingers at others is not a very constructive way of going about resolving the issues in your own country. And a more constructive approach, I would suggest, is to reach out to others and find pathways to solutions that deliver benefits to all concerned. That would be the simple advice that I would give to those in Washington.
A lot to think about, Warwick Powell. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Absolute pleasure.
And on that note, that will be it for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so do let me know down below. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.